presence of pure being as we give thanks for this beautiful Easter day, this bright and sunny day. In this season for renewal, we are so grateful that we have come to this point in our lives where we can be in the presence of God in a beautiful setting and knowing that all is well within and without. We are just so grateful for everything in our lives. And we ponder this day, what it means, and our opportunity for renewal. And so it is. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's so good to be here, to see so many beautiful, familiar faces and some that are new, but that's good. We're grateful. So I'm going to talk about Easter Sunday, particularly the resurrection. That's what we want to focus on now, is the resurrection, because we've put everything else behind us at this point. So we know that the week between Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday is designated as Holy Week. So, have we had busy Holy Week? Jesus certainly had one. Jesus had a very busy Holy Week. So he goes from being feted into coming into Jerusalem to being crucified on Friday. So we have 4 things that occurred here leading up to the resurrection. The first was the trial, which wasn't really much of a trial. You know, you wonder, well, what happened to due process there? Where was the due process? You know, he didn't get a chance to speak for himself. And then the crucifixion, that's right, baby. And then the crucifixion, which we talk about as of Good Friday, the tomb, time in the tomb, and the resurrection. So I'm going to talk about all 4 of these, but as I said, our focus today is on the resurrection. Happy Resurrection Day. Okay, the trial, we said lack of due process there. Jesus had turned the order, the established order, upside down, as we do sometimes, willingly or through circumstance. We have to turn our lives upside down. Jesus was a threat to the status quo. Boy, was he. And the ruling class wanted him gone. And the only way to do that was through the government that was represented by the Romans. So it was not Jewish people that were responsible for the crucifixion. It was the Romans, but they were persuaded by Sadducees and Pharisees to do so because Jesus was such a rabble-rouser. Wow. So Jesus had done several things that angered the established order. First of all, he violated the Sabbath by doing his healing work. He ignored the custom of Jewish fathers concerning the washing of hands before eating. He claimed the right to and exercised the authority to forgive sins. And if you ever read the Week That Changed the World, the question is asked, by whose authority? Who gives you the authority to do this? You know, who are you, in other words? He claimed the right to and exercised the authority to step in when he felt that people were being threatened. With a woman caught in the act of adultery, he spoke up for her. And he said, let whoever has never done anything cast the first stone. Well, of course, crickets. So you cast the first stone. You are faultless. You are forgiven. You are blessed. All of these things. So you are the one to throw the stone. So what did they do? They put the stones down and turned around and went back. Judgment. The judgment had been ameliorated by that statement. Jesus consorted with those judged as unacceptable, outcasts, if you will, and definitely an insult to the status quo. I've been watching that series on Amazon. I had to think there for a second. The Chosen. And that's a pretty interesting depiction of the events of that time. Okay, for one thing, and I was really surprised to find this out, is that Matthew is depicted as being autistic. You know, so that's really interesting there. You know, Matthew had been the tax collector, and he was recruited by Jesus to come and be with the disciples. And the ones among the group were kind of judgmental about him, okay, because Matthew was writing everything down. And then they said, well, one disciple said, well, if he's writing everything down, when they find Jesus, they'll have a full account of it and have more against Jesus. But Matthew continued to write things down. So it was a different kind of a depiction. Now, the goal of the trial, without due process, was to exact a confession from Jesus. Because the idea was he would declare himself the Son of God, which would lead to charges of blasphemy, which was an offense punishable by death. Sometimes when we seek to take our lives in a different direction, that can upset the established order, particularly within families. You decide you want to do something different that may conflict with a person in your life, and there is a problem. So indeed, life's ups and downs with changing fortunes can make us feel that we are on trial. Ever feel like sometimes, wow, what is this? Now, not to the extent that Jesus did, of course, but we can relate to that because sometimes we do feel as though we are on trial. Then we have on Wednesday, and this is all in the week that was, on Thursday, Jesus had one of his disciples to go out, and he had them to prepare for Maundy Thursday service, which is Holy Thursday. And Chris and I were present at a beautiful Maundy Thursday service, which had been much missed by me through the years because I hadn't been to one in so long, and it was a beautiful service with the music, and we didn't share the wine and the bread, but as the minister said, the bread was gluten-free, and the wine was no wine, not alcoholic. But anyway, that didn't make any difference. So we did the bread and the wine. We had to get up and take the piece of bread, dip it in the wine, and then eat it. So that was part of the ritual there. Then we had the washing of the feet. And I missed this because in a previous lifetime, in a church, in another church, we would become disciples. Prayer chaplains would be the disciples. And we call them practitioners. We didn't call them prayer chaplains, but it's the same thing. So we would choose to be disciples. And there's one little lady that she recently made her transition. She was in her 90s, but she would always insist on playing Judas because she felt that Judas got a bad rap. So we had, and this was a little bit different because what they had was two of their chaplains in the front, and then you would come up and expose one foot. Now, we used to do both feet, but that's not a judgment. But we would do one foot and get that foot washed, and then we'd go back to our seat. And then there was a 12 powers ritual whereby each calendar representing each of the powers was lit. And there was a person who would come up and say what that power meant and say something about it. And then we were invited to take our candle and come up, those who wanted to, and light from the candle that you feel relates to you. And of course, I lit faith because that's been my intentional word all year is faith. So I lit faith, and then other people lit other things. But it was just a beautiful service with beautiful music and much appreciated. Then Friday, the crucifixion, I actually attended an Episcopal service. I'd never been to an Episcopal service. I'd been in Episcopal churches before, but never an Episcopal service. And they celebrated the Stations of the Cross, and we had 13 different women, and this is what attracted me to it because I'm partial to the women in the Bible. Each one would come up and she would talk about her part, the part that she played on that day. Because we know that the women were there. The only male person depicted as there was John. And that was so that John could give care and keeping of his mother to John. Behold, see your mother. And then he said to her, behold, this is your son. So he made sure that Mary was cared for, his mother was cared for in that day. So each one came up, 13 different people. There was some music there. And then when I looked at that, I thought, oh, this is going to be long. But it wasn't. You know, we Unity people get used to short services, believe it or not. So when you go to another church, you can expect to be there longer than we are here, okay? That's not a judgment, but that's the way they do things. So Jesus went out, and Charles Fillmore said that the cross is a symbol of triumph and travail. In the revealing word, Charles Fillmore says the cross represents the state of consciousness termed mortal mind, the carnal mind of Paul also, and it burdens the body with its various erroneous beliefs. So it says he went out bearing the cross for himself. And this is not funny, but when it says that he went out bearing the cross, he had to carry his own cross. Have you ever been sent out to get a switch? You know, and you try to find the smallest one, and then your mother would make you go back and get a switch. I said, get a switch. But anyway, and that's not to say my mother was abusive or anything, but that's the way people did things at that time. So he went out bearing the cross, his own cross, and in the process, they talk about the many times that Jesus fell down. And I can't think of that Mel Gibson movie right now. No, It was about the crucifixion, Passion of the Christ. I will never watch that movie again. But anyway, it depicted Jesus carrying this cross, and he falls several times. And these women mentioned that in their part of the service that they did. And then they mentioned Simon the Cyrene, who just happened to be in the crowd, and they made Simon go over and carry Jesus' cross for a while because Jesus was very weak. And it has been said that they did that not to be compassionate, but they didn't want him to die before he got to the cross. So we went through these whole 14 stations of the cross, and I did some research on that, and that seems like something. I went with a friend because she said she's trying to decide what she wants to do as far as religion is concerned. So I said, okay. She said, come go with me to this service. So I went, and it was very beautiful. So anyway, they took him to the place of the skull, Golgotha. It was way outside of town, away from the public, because if you're crucifying somebody, do you want little children and other people watching this? So they took him away. The cross is not a burden as commonly understood, but a symbol of the forces in man adjusted in their right relation. The crucifixion is the crossing out in the consciousness of errors that have become fixed states of mind. Anybody have those? Sometimes we have them and don't realize it. The surrender or death of the whole personality so that the Christ mind can be expressed in all of its fullness. So this is the purpose of Lent. Lent is to look at these things and to eliminate, let's eliminate negative thinking, eliminate those things that do not serve us. And it's not so much about giving up candy, which I needed to and wasn't successful at. But anyway, it's about giving up erroneous states of mind, erroneous states of consciousness. That's what Lent is all about. The crucifixion of Jesus represents the wiping of personality from our own consciousness. We deny the human self so that we might unite with the selfless. We give up the mortal to obtain the immortal. We dissolve the thought of the physical body so that we may realize the spiritual body. Everyone has to bear the cross from time to time. The burdens of life must be lifted and carried. In doing so, we call forth at least a portion of the great potential that is in all of us. And when asked about unity, which I often am asked about unity, different questions. Well, you people think you're God. Well, no, we're part of God. We are a part of God. And then I tell them, I say, Jesus said, he told his disciples, these things that I'm doing, you can do these and more. So there's that potential in all of us, and people don't like to hear that sometimes. And why? Because it entails responsibility. Responsibility for your own life. We want to put it on someone else. I'm this way, or this happened to me because, no, you take responsibility for your life. So we call forth that great potential. These times of travail call forth the highest and best in us because they cause us to stretch. Some of us being stretched now. Yes, some of us are being stretched now. The crucifixion is letting go. We may not bypass the crucifixion because it is a necessary step in the process. There has to be a crucifixion before there can be a resurrection. So no crucifixion, no resurrection. And as people, older people in my life used to say, no cross, no crown. So the tomb is a resting place. I remember one time I had seen this recipe. There used to be, well, there still is because they carried it on after his transition, Positive Christianity. I can't think of his name right now. His first name was Chris. But he made his transition last year. But he had a recipe in one of his daily things. I used to get his daily messages. And it was about making these cookies where you had to make the cookies up and then put them in the oven and seal the oven. And, you know, that was representative of being in the tomb. So specifically, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, where Jesus' body was buried, represents an aggregation of thoughts of lofty character, a high state of consciousness in man. Joseph represents a state of consciousness in which we are improving spiritually. The tomb represents an elevated, peaceful state of consciousness in which he rested the 3 days before his resurrection. So a time of release, a time of relaxing, a time of spiritually going within can be represented by the tomb. So Jesus rested 3 days before his resurrection. And speaking of faith, we know that the women, Mary included and several other women, prepared the herbs and the dressing for the body, as was the tradition. But then there was a large stone in front of the tomb. So I always wondered, what were they going to do when they got to that stone? But in their faith and having faith, they went anyway. So that's what it means to have faith. 3 days in the tomb represents 3 steps to overcoming. Number 1 is non-resistance. Number 2, taking on divine activity or receiving the will of God. Be still and know that I am God. Assimilation and fulfillment of the divine will is number 3. Okay, during the pandemic, which is, I would like it to become a distant memory, but it's not. But anyway, many of us experienced time in the tomb during the pandemic because we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't do anything. I gave a message in my home that was taped and filmed by my husband and was later showed on that church's website. So we did that at home, and the telephone rang right in the middle of it. So we had to go and, silence that bout. I was looking at that this morning and was like, yeah, we did that, didn't we? But he had gotten me this podium like this, and we had flowers, and we had a background, blue, and I did my message. So that was the result of people having to stay away from church, having to stay from one another. So the periods in which we go apart, be quiet, and rest in expectancy and anticipation. It may be likened to winter when nature is dormant and appears to be dead. I have heard said that this is the time when things are the most alive because forces come together for the return of the outward expression we know as spring and summer. So it is a very active time, even though it is quiet and it is dormant. We experience being forced to withdraw, go inward to reflect, renew, and marshal our energies for a more excellent demonstration. And then the resurrection, which is the whole point of today. Because I used to tell my mother, it's not about all that, it's about the resurrection. And she'd look at me like, little girl, it's about the resurrection. The resurrection is called Christianity's defining moment. It is the raising up of the whole man, spirit, soul, body, into Christ consciousness, our highest potential of life and wholeness. Jesus did it, and he promised us that we could too. Resurrection can be a defining moment for us. When this is over, or at that time, we realized that when it was over, we would find ourselves with a new normal. We don't go back to the old ways exactly. We go back to some of them. But still, how many of you still wear a mask in public sometimes? I know I do, okay? So that hasn't left us. We know that Jesus expressed the Christ potential to the highest level. He accomplished this through the quickening power of the Holy Spirit, the whole Spirit of God, our comforter. Remember, Jesus left the Holy Spirit with the disciples. Because Jesus had to go away, because otherwise the disciples would still be dependent on him to provide for them and to give them spiritual food. Jesus said, no. My time here is over. It's time for you to be on your own. And if he hadn't done that, the disciples would have continued to just depend on Jesus. So the tomb could not hold the redeemed, perfected body of Jesus. We don't stay in the tomb. We emerge from it more robust. We rise to the eternal indwelling life. We live all thoughts of limitation in the tomb. We are in a time of self-reflection, a time of personal inventory. We had plenty of time to look at where we were and to assess how far we've come. Where has our journey led us? There is no need to wait until the calendar changes. We can make use of it this time to do it, and that is the meaning of the resurrection. In the words of Maya Angelou, if you don't like something, change it. Sounds easy, doesn't it? If you can't change it, change your attitude about it. We can use our 12 powers, particularly wisdom and understanding, in undertaking the process. And that is what we should be doing at the time of Lent. Okay, the compelling power of Easter represents a new vision for overcoming, reawakening, and rebirth, and ultimately a change of mind about the meaning of the world. For rising above any experience of pain, lack, or limitation, or seeming defeat reflects the ultimate message of Easter. We can overcome. And we did. We have many examples of that. A Course in Miracles describes Holy Week as beginning with palms and ending with lilies. And on a personal note, Thursday afternoon, a friend of mine came to my house and presented me with the most beautiful lily. I posted the picture on Facebook, and I received many beautiful compliments, including one with a beautiful post. So there is some good even in Facebook. And another friend of mine posted the question, why lilies at Easter? Easter lilies are shaped like trumpets, symbolizing victory and the proclamation of the resurrection. They often bloom around Easter and represent purity, new life, and the beauty that comes after sorrow, just like the resurrection after the cross. So Jesus said, I am your resurrection, I am your life. You live in me because, like me, you live in God, and everyone lives in you as you live in everyone. Celebrate the risen Christ, a symbol of joy and a sign of peace. Realize beyond any doubt that we are resurrected into God's life, light, and power as we live in unity with the indwelling Christ. As the cross did, the crucifixion, this too shall pass, and we will be better for it. And that's in times of trial. Just know that these too shall pass, and we will be better for it, and we will go on to live more fully revealed lives. And so it is. And thank you very much for welcoming me back. Namaste.